Welcome back to another episode of 40 Facts About the 40K Universe. I am your host, Gersh1, and today we're going to be talking about the Sisters of Battle. If you're new to the channel, subscribe. We post Warhammer 40K lore videos every single day. If you have any suggestions, please comment down below. And don't forget to hit the little bell notification icon to stay updated to see if we created a video for you. And also, if you enjoy our content, thank our patrons on Patreon. It's because of them that we can do this. Link in the description if you guys want to support us. But with that said, let's get into the origins of the Sisters of Battle. The creation of the organization that would become the Sisters of Battle dates back to the 36th millennium. But to fully understand how such a powerful sisterhood of warriors found itself acting as the military force of the imperial religious structure known as the Ecclesiarchy, one must look even further back to a time in imperial history when humanity's wisdom was corrupted by ideologues. At the dawn of the 34th millennium, the Ecclesiarchy, which at that time was only known as the Adeptus Ministorum, had finally wrestled control of the Imperium of Man. This organization not only solidified itself as the ruling religious structure of all humanity, defeating all other ideologies, but it also managed to subjugate almost every other structure that existed at the time. This included the Senatorum Imperialis of the High Lords of Terra, the one structure created by the Emperor during the Great Crusade to aid humanity in governing themselves. The Church's power even extended to secular matters. By being the first to dip into the funds and resources of the Imperium, the Ministorum was able to weaken the once great bureaucracy of man, known as the Adeptus Administratum. This meant that the Church usurped command of every part of human lives. The raising and deployment of armies, the prosecution of wars, the commitment of significant imperial resources, and the appointment of sector lords all fell under the effective control of the Ministorum. The Church was so thorough in their power grab that all their members were viewed as speaking with the authority of the Emperor of mankind, and like so many governing bodies who pushed a religious doctrine in order to maintain control, the Church abused that power. They stomped out the few remaining groups that still believed in the imperial truth, and with that, reason and knowledge in the Imperium was fully trumped by blind worship and stagnation. Over the course of the 35th millennium, the Administratum managed to claw back some of its former influence, but only through a series of schemes that were ultimately to the detriment of the Imperium as a whole. By the appointment of covert supporters into key positions of power across the Imperium, the Administratum slowly eroded its rivals' power and ensured that those officials the Ministorum did succeed in placing were weak or incompetent. Though this ruthlessly instigated policy regained some of the Administratum's lost power, it set in motion a series of events that would see the Imperium face its greatest catastrophe since the Horus Heresy. In an effort to reverse the decline in its fortune, the Ecclesiarch Benedict IV declared that the Ministorum's upper echelons would move from Terra to the planet of Ophelia 7, a world in the Segmentum Tempestus and one of the richest in the Imperium after Terra and Mars. Moving the operations of the Holy Synod to Ophelia 7 was a vast undertaking, but the effort proved well worthwhile. Separated from the schemes of the Senatorum Imperialis by 10,000 light-years, the Ministorum's power grew anew. The Synod became a force unto itself, and freed from the interference of other High Lords, the Ecclesiarch was able to raise entire armies and fleets in order to enforce its newfound influence across the Imperium. These forces, known as the Frateres Templar, came to rival the conventional military armies and fleets of the Imperium. They soon came to be greatly resented wherever they traveled. 300 standard years into this new age of influence and power in the late 35th millennium, Gregor XI was elected to the rank of Ecclesiarch. Heralded as a deeply spiritual individual who desired only the faithful work together as one, Gregor announced that the Holy Synod would return to its rightful home on Terra, the seat of the Emperor and the heart of the Imperium. The Cardinals opposed this course, not least because the Ministorum was so firmly entrenched upon Ophelia 7 that a move would be a vast logistical exercise that would stretch the institution's resources to its limits. Subsequent history would prove the naysayers entirely correct, but none were able to deter Gregor from his grand undertaking. The relocation took over a decade to organize and carry out, and it was only possible due to a massive increase in the Ministorum's tithes. Gregor XI was discovered dead, the victim of food poisoning. The true cause of his death may never be known, but the anarchy deepened as the Ministorum's upper echelons continued as before, imposing more unreasonable demands on their congregations. Eventually, entire worlds buckled under the strain, their populations starving to fund the reconstruction of the long-abandoned Ecclesiarchy Palace on Terra. As if the situation could not get any worse, the entire Imperium was soon plunged in the early 36th millennium into an even deeper despair. An incident of warp storms, a phenomenon that cut off vast swaths of the Imperium's space from interstellar travel, increased by an order of magnitude. The warp began to seethe with roiling energies which bled forth into real space, making travel between anything other than a world in the same planetary system increasingly perilous. The central governance of worlds that was limited to only periodic contact at best of times entirely collapsed. Seeing that their foes were tearing themselves apart, the enemies of humanity struck. The traitor legions sailed forth from the Eye of Terror, using their blasphemous sorceries to strike planets otherwise cut off from outside aid. Orcs traversed the warp in their ramshackled space hulks, uncaring where the tides of the warp regurgitated them, and wreaking havoc in regions previously beyond their reach. The Dark Eldar used their webways to freely navigate the galaxy and struck wherever they desired, dragging millions of captives screaming into their infernal realm of Kamara to suffer the degradation beyond a sane man's imagination. The entire Imperium was gripped by an apocalyptic frenzy of doom and anarchy. Countless new sects sprung up into being, many proclaiming that the God Emperor was enacting his final judgment upon mankind, and that the end times were at hand. No world was untouched by the anarchy, as whole populations rose up in increasingly bizarre and extravagant acts of penance and self-flagellation. Anyone who dared to attempt to reason with such naysayers were declared heretics, and world after world tore themselves apart in an orgy of bloodletting and violent penance. This turbulent time was seen as an opportunity for Goge Vandire, the 361st Master of the Adeptus Administratum, a position he had attained in the early centuries of the 36th millennium by the ruthless application of bribes, threats, and outright assassinations. A strict opponent of the Ministorum, Vandire had plotted against it for many years. Shortly before his ascension to the rank of High Lord of Terra, Vandire brought about the selection of a man of his own choosing to the head of the Ecclesiarchy, ensuring that none could stand before his subsequent rise. The new Ecclesiarch, Paulus III, was perhaps the weakest man ever to have served in that office, and soon after his ascension, rumors regarding the degeneracies in which he reveled in began to circulate amongst the upper echelons of the Imperium's ruling bodies. As confidence in the new Ecclesiarch plummeted, Goge Vandire made his move. Leading a band of his most trusted retainers, the Master of the Administratum forced entry into the Ecclesiarchal Palace, cutting down any who attempted to deny them access to Paulus' personal wing. It is said that when Vandire and his men came upon the Ecclesiarch, he was engaged in some vile debauchery that, were it to be known to the people, would bring eternal shame down upon the entire Imperium. Without trial or appeal, Paulus was slain. In a daring coup, Vandire proclaimed himself both the new Ecclesiarch and the Master of the Adeptus Administratum, claiming control of both institutions. The next couple days saw the High Lord consolidate his power in a series of brutal purgings of the Holy Synod. Many cardinals simply fled before Vandire's warriors could come for them, while others were defiant, mounting futile, if brave, objections. These were slaughtered, to be replaced with men either so weak that they would obey Vandire's every word, or by cunning supporters who shared his own agenda. With his power base firmly established, High Lord Vandire was able to give free rein to the unfettered extremes of his ambition. Whether or not Vandire was unbalanced before his rise, after it was achieved he plummeted to new depths of insanity. The High Lord claimed that he spoke with the authority of the Emperor himself, and that he convened with the God Emperor during many trance-like blackouts into which he would regularly fall. Coming out of these trances, the High Lord would enter into a rage, insisting that his every utterance be transcribed by the army of clerks that awaited on his every word. Many of these orders defied logic, with Vandire taking violent action against whole sections of the Imperium's population. No matter how deranged his antics became, Vandire maintained a strong support structure. It wasn't long before his agents sent him word of a unique sisterhood of warrior women living on the little-known world of San Leor. This convent of women took their veneration of the Emperor of Mankind to such extremes that they vowed to live a life of abstinence and dedicate themselves to mastering their skills at arms. Intrigued by this notion, Vandire organized a formal visit to the secluded home of the daughters of the Emperor. The first that the inhabitants of San Lior knew about the state visit by the man who was the de facto lord of the Imperium was when several thousand of his retainers marched into their simple towns and demanded that they show the High Lord the utmost devotion on pain of death. Images of these vast processions were recorded by the spy lenses of hundreds of servo skulls and disseminated across every world in the Imperium, not cut off by the raging warp storms. The image of the High Lord Vandire being welcomed to San Lior became a staple of Ecclesiarchy propaganda. When at last the vast cavalcade reached the gates of the convent in which the daughters of the Emperor resided, Vandire found them barred and closed. The voice of the gatekeeper informed the High Lord that the daughters of the Emperor recognized only the authority of the God Emperor himself and would open their gates to no man. Vandire's attendants cringed in anticipation of an explosion of rage, yet uncharacteristically the High Lord remained calm. In a serene manner, Vandire told the gatekeeper that he would prove that he spoke with the authority of the Emperor if they would allow him to enter their convent with but a small bodyguard. The daughters of the Emperor accepted Vandire's request. The High Lord and a small group of his retainers were led into the central courtyard. There, Vandire announced to the gathered sisters that he would prove that the Emperor's grace was upon him, and should he lie, he would be slain. Vandire brandished his rosarius and ordered one of his bodyguards to shoot him. The man was dumbfounded and fearful of harming his master, but Vandire insisted. Forcing his trembling hand to stillness, the guard aimed his last pistol straight at Vandire's heart and fired. Vandire was consumed in a blinding white light, and when the vision of the gathered witnesses had cleared, they saw that he stood unharmed before them. All in the courtyard went down on one knee, and the daughters of the Emperor proclaimed their fealty to the High Lord Vandire. In truth, Vandire had tricked the sisters, gambling that they would never have seen a rosarius. It was the energy field projected by the generator within the ornate medallion that turned the guard shot, and not the protection of the Emperor. Nonetheless, the daughters of the Emperor promised themselves to serve their new master, and at his own command, they changed the name of their order to the Brides of the Emperor. The sisters became Vandire's personal bodyguards, and their skill at arms was enhanced by training in the finest weapons and armor that the High Lord could provide. The Brides of the Emperor would stand at Vandire's side wherever he went, and they were both his bodyguards and his executioners. Word of their dedication spread across the worlds of the Imperium, and none who entered the High Lord's presence would so much as look at him strange, under the silent, watchful gaze of the Brides of the Emperor. Countless millions soon burned in the fires of Vandire's reign of blood. It was during this dark, forbidding time that a reformist sect known as the Confederation of Light emerged and denounced Vandire as a traitor. Led by the preacher Sebastian Thor, the Confederation of Light spread its message of a church dedicated not to politics and the secular rule of the Imperium, but to the compassion and mercy of the Emperor, to a brutalized people only too ready to throw off the yoke of oppression. An incredible speaker, Sebastian Thor swayed whole worlds to his cause and turned the tide against Vandire. As Thor's crusade smashed aside those who remained loyal to the Ecclesiarchy, the Space Marines and the Adeptus Mechanicus, both of whom had remained largely on the defensive during the Age of Apostasy, were finally able to join forces with Thor and close on Terra. As Vandire's madness had become too apparent, the Fabricator General of the Adeptus Mechanicus rose to the Senatorum Imperialis and ousted Vandire from power. Vandire's answer was to dissolve the Senatorum Imperialis completely and declare both the Mechanicus and the Adeptus Astartes as heretics and traitors to the Imperium. This affront made the Space Marines reconsider their neutrality towards Vandire and the reign of blood in general. At the height of the Age of Apostasy, an elite Space Marine strike force composed of forces drawn from the Imperial Fist, the Black Templars, the Firehawks, the Soul Drinkers, and the forces of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Space Marines, believing Vandire to be only protected by legions of zealous but ineffective Fraternus Templar troops, launched one of their trademark lightning drop pod assaults. However, once on the ground, the Astartes found to their dismay that they had grossly underestimated the opposition. Facing them was a corps of superbly trained warrior women who fought with a passion remarkable even to the Astarte opponents, and stood their ground to the last woman, fearless and fanatical in the belief that they were protecting the Emperor himself. The Space Marines' assault bogged down as they were pushed back with casualties, and the attackers were forced to restore to a long, grinding, and bloody siege of the Ecclesiarchal Palace complex, with quarter neither asked for nor given. For solar months, Vandire's army withstood every assault. The madness only ended when the commander of the Adeptus Custodes, the Praetorian Guard of the Emperor himself, sought out Alicia Dominica, the leader of the Brides of the Emperor, and her most trusted companions, the leaders of Vandire's bodyguard. The Custodes took them before the Golden Throne and the God Emperor himself, and though no written history tells of what transpired there, it was evident that some great truth was passed on to Dominica and her fellow warriors. When they emerged from the bowels of the Imperial Palace, they marched with barely controlled fury to Vandire's audience chamber. There they found him in the midst of yet another insane tirade, pausing only to condemn him for his crimes against the Emperor. Reportedly, Vandire's final words were, "I don't have time to die, I'm too busy." Alicia Dominica drew her power sword and beheaded the High Lord. It was said that at the moment of truth, Vandire's Rosarius, which had protected him on San Leor, now failed him, its gleaming form cleaved in two by Alicia's blow. And with that, the reign of blood was ended by the Brides of the Emperor. In the wake of Vandire's downfall, Sebastian Thor was declared the 292nd Ecclesiarch, and the Imperium began the long process of rebuilding. Perhaps the most sweeping of changes Thor instigated affected the military force over which the Ministorum held sway. What remained of the Fraterus Templar was disbanded, under the terms of the so-called Decree Passive, which forbade the Adeptus Ministorum from controlling any men-at-arms. Never again would the Ecclesiarchy threaten the continued rule of the Administratum. The brides, after resuming their original title of Daughters of the Emperor, were at a loss as to what their purpose should be after this event, and so the Ecclesiarchy took the opportunity to recruit and indoctrinate them into the ranks of the Ministorum's military force. Due to their all-female membership, the Daughters of the Emperor did not technically break the band, and thus the Ecclesiarchy was able to circumvent the Decree Passive's restriction, even if the spirit of Thor's decree was rather blatantly disregarded. This newly formed military force was renamed the Orders Militant of the Adeptus Sororitas. The sisterhood became the true defenders of the faith, and a very physical reminder of the power of the Ecclesiarchy. During the first years of the sisterhood's existence, Alicia Dominica, who founded the Orders Militant of Thor's behest, led wars of faith against the alien invaders that had exploited the Imperium's weakness during the Reign of Blood. Silvana, Mina, Lucia, Catherine, and Arabella, those sisters who had joined her before the Golden Throne, accompanied Dominica. Under their combined leadership, the Sisters of Battle were filled with righteousness of purpose that the Imperium had not witnessed since the legendary days of the Great Crusade. Countless enemies fell as the armies of the Sisters of Battle brought the divine judgment of the Ecclesiarchy to the farthest corners of the galaxy, and to this day, the Sisters of Battle have stood as faithful and loyal defenders of the Ecclesiarchy and the Imperium. And those were 40 facts on the Sisters of Battle. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. We have other 40 facts videos on Alicia Dominica, and we also have already started our 40 facts on all the different sisterhoods. I forget what they're called. They're the convents. They're separate little factions within this Sisters of Battle. So that's going to be linked at the end of the video, if not in the cards above. But yeah, we already have those videos. More Sisters of Battle lore to come. If you guys have any questions about anything, comment down below. If you guys want us to branch off and create a video based on the Sisters of Battle that you guys just found interesting, just comment down below. And yeah, I'll talk to you tomorrow. This is Gershwan with One Mind Syndicate signing out.
Oh, I did the